Battle of Wake Island began one day after the Japanese surprise attack on Pearl Harbor on December 8, 1941. 450 U.S. Marines and a group of construction workers would then proceed to absolutely destroy Japan in the First Battle of Wake Island, where 27 Japanese bombers didn't hit anything worth a crap except 8 out of the 12 U.S. planes. Marine artillery then proceeded to blast the Japanese Navy at what is considered to be point-blank range for an artillery at 4,000 yards on December 11, 1941. The 4 remaining American Wildcat planes took off from Wake Island and proceeded to absolutely mess up the Japanese Navy, as the Japanese didn't bring a carrier and therefore had no air support. Also, the Japanese anti-aircraft guns couldn't shoot any of the American planes down. Nobody on the American side died on the first attack compared to 300 Japanese men and quite a few ships due to coastal artillery attacks and planes. The Japanese, feeling like rage quitting, proceeded to then bomb the island non-stop a second time, but still had stormtrooper aim and hit nothing of value. The Japanese second attack came with an even larger naval force with 2 aircraft carriers from the Pearl Harbor attack to fix their mistake of not bringing any air support in before. To nobody's surprise, the Japanese Navy also avoided coming even remotely close to Wake Island due to the Marine coastal artillery. Therefore, the Japanese sent in every plane and 900 sailors to Wake Island, and the 2 remaining American planes shot down 21 Japanese planes. Meanwhile, on the island, the Marines proceeded to destroy the Japanese invasion forces. However, the Marine communications had been destroyed by Japan in their newest bombardment, and Commander Devereaux thought that his Marines had mostly been killed when the situation on Wake was actually the exact opposite. I cannot overstate to you just how much the Marines were decimating the Japanese forces. Commander Devereaux ordered his men to surrender despite the fact that there were little American casualties compared to a massive number of dead Japanese. He didn't understand that his Marines had overrun the Japanese positions and were kicking the living crap out of the Japanese, and therefore the Japanese were not very big on respecting the idea of American POWs after the Marines surrendered. The Japanese stripped all of the American POWs to be butt naked on an airfield and intended on executing them as a means of humiliation. You see, the Japanese weren't really big on seeing anyone who surrendered as being a human being anymore. However, due to the stiff resistance on Wake Island, the entire world was watching as the Emperor then chose to spare the prisoners' lives, as the Japanese knew that they wouldn't get away with this massive atrocity. But, they did a lot of other massacres and atrocities throughout World War II that they kinda got away with. The Battle of Wake Island was pretty significant because it showed that 450 unprepared Marines who were at war with Japan were able to crush them despite the Japanese being already ready for war and having an overwhelming force. Also, this was the tip of the spear of the sleeping giant which Japan had poked and met a few days after the Battle of Pearl Harbor. However, Japan would still win at a great cost. With all of that context out of the way, let's get in to see what conditions can be changed to produce an American victory at the Battle of Wake Island. What is changed in the battle will be that the Japanese bombing in the second attack will not cut the communications lines so that Devereaux can know that his Marines were essentially using the Japanese as a punching bag. Additionally, the U.S. Navy will still be heading to Wake instead of being ordered to turn around like they were in our timeline, thus abandoning the Marines and workers on the island. I feel like those 2 conditions alone would be enough to produce an American victory over Japan. In this alternate timeline, Devereaux has comms up with his troops and heard that they were destroying the Japanese forces and had them carry on instead of surrendering. The U.S. then has a land victory, and Japan is even further pushed to the angry edge after being repelled by the Marines once again. Japan will then have to call up more reinforcements if they want to launch a third attack on Wake Island, which I feel like they would, as some of these reinforcements would still have to be diverted from going to other places in the Pacific Theater, because, Japan's honor is on the line here. I'm not sure how long it would take for either a third Japanese attack force versus the U.S. naval forces to arrive, but what is for sure is that Japan would probably bomb the island yet again, and Japan is beaten back a third time partially due to their own skill issue, but also because you saw what a few hundred unprepared Marine and construction workers could do to Japan. Just imagine what the full might of a U.S. relief force and newly supplied troops on the island can do to the Japanese. I feel like Japan might learn from some of their mistakes in the first 2 attempts, but come on, this is history where sometimes those in charge have little idea of how to run the show properly. The rest of this alternate Pacific War sees Japanese forces having been diverted to the Third Battle of Wake Island, which failed and ended in a massive Japanese defeat again. This is very important for a much-needed American morale boost all over the Pacific. I don't see the U.S. suddenly winning at the Philippines, but I think resistance would be a lot stiffer against the Japanese. But U.S. forces from Wake Island are able to create a large bulge in the Japanese Pacific lines. The Allies in World War II will have an easier time in the Pacific, but it's still not going to be a cakewalk. Japanese are still going to be pretty tough to fight in the first years of the Pacific War. The main difference is the morale of the Allies and the extreme fear within the Japanese whenever they face the United States Marine Corps. With that, I'll end the scenario. Yeah, I know not a lot has changed, but sometimes the thing with alternate history is that small or large changes can sometimes produce drastic changes or little change in the grand geopolitical situation. But that is, of course, just one possible alternate history scenario for if the U.S. won at the Battle of Wake Island. What do you think would have happened and how it would have affected the rest of World War II in the Pacific theater? Write in the comments, and thank you for watching.